to our ninth episode. Today, we just the both of us, and we have a great topic that we want to talk about today. Things that we relate to very deeply as well. We're going to be talking about prepping for a bodybuilding show on the road. Now, in this topic, we will talk a little bit about during your prep, things that we want to be doing, as well as peak week if you're on the road. Now, we want to talk about this is number one, we're actually doing the same thing. And I think if you're in Canada or even in the US, it's a big country, and competitions are all over the states, all over the world. So we do have a couple things that we want to just talk a little bit about, and I do want to mention on some struggles competitors will face just due to the fact that you're not in your familiar environment and probably lack of access to some stuff like foods, gyms, and just traveling stress. And that's what we want. We'll probably talk a little bit about that today. But yeah, you've competed, a good couple times locally and on the road, I would say.
Yeah, like I've done, I want to say probably I've probably done more shows on the road than like local shows, I would say. Actually, is that true? I think they're probably about even, I would say. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So probably we'll say like, peak week is going to be everybody would probably want to talk about peak week, just being on the road demands and the flexibility there, but we'll probably dig into that in just a bit. However, I do want to like highlight that we can actually still nail peak week, if we have a plan. I do want to just highlight this specific word since you've done it a couple times. I've done it probably once here because I went to Calgary. So well, it's not like that far away. I mean, it's only an hour difference. But
In terms of,
yeah, but I've actually been with Maggie when we went to, so my wife went to Toronto one time for her nationals, and we had to travel to Toronto. So it's a 5 hour flight, and we were there on a night flight. So it was like what 6 p.m. here on PST time. But the time we actually got to Toronto was almost 10:30 at night. It was a 4.5, 5 hour flight, including the time difference. And the worst thing was the flight actually delayed.
ah, shit.
It's Flair. I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, no, wait, it was West. I forgot it was WestJet or it was Flair. It was either or. But then I think that was the worst thing, that the flight delayed, and because she was on the road, we didn't actually prepare enough food and water for her. So I think that's something that I wanted to actually talk about first is prepping food if you're on the road. So maybe like if you're on the road, like what would say be some of the food that you would prep, or maybe some things that you would be using, ingredients that you'd be using if you're traveling.
Yeah, so it depends. If it's something like a road trip, like a shorter road trip, like when I was going from Kelowna to Vancouver, when I met up with you there for the Vancouver show 2 years ago, I
Yep.
just had like a cooler where I put all my usual meals in there and I was fine. But if it's something like a super long trip or you're going on an airplane and so you can't get that food with you, I always just look up like the regulations for the food ahead of time and like what you can actually bring on the plane. Because I've actually had meal prep meals on the plane. Sometimes it's fine. I think for if you're going to different countries, that's when it starts being an issue. But I believe in Canada, because I had a long trip to Montreal where I literally had like I think two or three meal prep containers on with like food in it on the plane, and I was just eating it cold, and like they were fine with it. I don't know if that's changed now, but I would always just double check ahead of time um, with like the company that you're flying with and seeing if they allow for that. But things like rice cakes, things like even like protein powder, hydrolyzed protein powder, I find digests a little bit better than some other ones. Even like Fairlife drinks can work quite well too. But just having like super easy stuff that you don't have to be keeping cold, yeah, little things like that can go a long way when it comes to like flying. But typically, I'll have enough food that I need if I'm flying somewhere. I have the amount of food I need to get in for that time period. But once I get there, I go immediately to the grocery store, pick up everything I need, and then go to either my Airbnb or hotel room.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Also, I do believe that bringing like a whole ton of dry foods if you're on the plane makes a huge difference. Like I think there's one of the most favorite foods if you're bringing on the take, we have like protein bars. Since you can't get enough water to get a shake in, so we probably just bring like protein bars on a plane. I mean, you're right. It does depend like how long the flight is going to be. But anything over like if you're talking about long flights, then if I think pre-packed meal. If you're traveling like over like 6 to 8 hours, then I do think like having a container or even a container would be good. You know Lauren, right? Lauren Loza.
Yeah, yeah,
She, I think she went to, I think last year when she competed, she brought, she had to travel down to Washington State, I think down to Portland, and then she had this cooler, this mini cooler, and then she rolled all her food into a Ziploc bag, and that's all her meals. I think it was a 3 to 4 day trip, and then she just rolled all her meals in these like small little Ziploc bags. Brought a little small container, and so when she get there, she'll just pour everything out of the Ziploc bag and just heat the food up. So I think that
huh,
that's a really smart idea from that. But I think you can make a really good point too. You know, having a access to a cooler or a travel meal bag. That's something that's you know pretty convenient to have.
yeah.
And then you're also bringing for flights, you're bringing rice cakes, right?
Yeah, so rice cakes, even cereal. Cereal is another great dry option for getting in carbs. You can snack on them. Like their potassium to sodium ratio is like really nice too, so you don't have to worry about salting things up more. Um, so yeah, that can work really well. I'm trying to think of some of the other things I've done, but yeah, like when I did do that flight, like that was probably man, that's got to be almost like 7, 8 years years ago. So I'm sure things might have changed a little bit with it, but yeah, just even having your food, like making sure you're eating before that. Yeah, bringing some dry food like cereal, rice cakes, protein bars, especially if they digest well. I know sometimes it can be iffy if you're at the airport, usually they'll have convenience stores where you can buy stuff too. So there's probably Fairlife drinks that you can get there too, or protein bars and stuff like that if you're having issues bringing it in through security kind of thing.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I think you make a really good point that you brought up for the protein bars. You know, we can't have too much of them. I do think like two is probably, you know, a good place to sit. Anything more, I just feel like the fiber and you just start to get bloating from all that stuff in the protein bar. I just think a little bit too much.
Yeah.
Uh,
And with the flying too, you typically you want to fly ahead of time. Like if it's a long travel day, like a lot of times people hold a little bit of water retention. I know sometimes people's ankles will swell up if it's a very long flight. So being like flying there ahead of time, like being there like 5 days early, 6 days early, sometimes can just help with that stress, get you reorganized to the time zone, and get your sleep kind of more normalized. So by the time it's show day, you're not so stressed out. If it's just like an hour or two difference, change in time, and it's not a really big deal. But yeah, I remember going to Montreal. It was yeah quite a big change in terms of just I can't remember how many hours ahead they were, but yeah,
it's not as much. Is it further than Toronto? Or I know Toronto is like 3 hours ahead from West Coast, and it's 2 hours ahead from where you are in
yeah.
Edmonton.
Okay, yeah. So it because I was living in BC at the time, so yeah, it
Yeah,
was probably like 3 or so hours ahead. Yeah, I would. I actually am not sure.
I
It's
don't
been so long.
remember.
Yeah,
It's and that's not important.
yeah,
But however, but you talk about like getting there a little bit earlier, which I do agree. If you are struggling with time zone differences, getting there early and just setting yourself in and getting used to the time zone with jet lags and things like that, it will help and contribute to the condition of your body is sitting. As you said, you know, you get swelling from joints and adapting to your new environment and seeing what's available. I think that's also something that I do want to also talk about because we want to get into the accommodation on the place where you will be competing. Usually what we do is we usually try to book a place with a kitchen. So Airbnbs are basically most of our go-to since it's got a kitchen, and usually Airbnb it's usually not in the middle of nowhere. There should be a grocery store nearby, I assume at least. I've rarely ran into an Airbnb on the road if we're competing and it's up in the mountain in the middle of nowhere. That's very rare occasion. But have you ran into a situation where you have to fly there and you find yourself in an Airbnb and you don't have a car. You probably have to walk, I don't know, like 30 minutes just to the closest grocery store or even just a gas station.
I genuinely look that up ahead of time. So if I'm booking an Airbnb, I just make sure there's something close. Because yeah, that's where it kind of becomes an issue. Unless you're renting a vehicle, unless you're okay with spending money on Ubering more, then that works okay. But usually, yeah, you want to try to find a Airbnb that's close enough to a grocery store, that's also close enough to a gym if you need to do a drop in. Or if you're in a hotel, sometimes I've been at hotels where they had like a kitchenette where there's a kitchen and everything there, and there's a gym in the hotel, so you're set. So that can work really well. Those ones generally are a little bit pricier though.
Yeah. But speaking of gyms, I think you make a really good segue and for us to talk a little bit about training on the road as well. Yeah, I do agree. Researching gyms way ahead of time, where the venue is going to be. I think that's also very important. You know where you're competing, and we'll probably look into what's around the venue of competition. So for me, I would probably look ahead where the competition is held, and I'll probably look for Airbnb around that area, and we'll probably just stay there. That way, we don't traveling from the hotel room or the Airbnb to the competition venue isn't too far. And we'll probably research ahead of time on what gyms they have. Usually in Airbnb, there's not going to be, let's say like a hotel, there's not going to be like an available gym there. And so we'll probably have to look for an alternative. Even though if you're there for 3 to 4 days, as you said, it's just 3 to 4 drop-ins, and we probably won't be lifting anymore once we get our tan on. So probably just two times and just do a drop-in, and that's very very easily doable. Uh, but however, we have ran into. I want to talk about hotel gyms because that's something is going to be a bit of a challenge. Hotel gyms usually some are nice, some have the whole shebang of the a lot of equipment, heavy enough dumbbells and enough benches. However, we've ran into some hotels. You've seen some hotels which has the bare minimum. We're talking about just an elliptical, probably two treadmills, and I think the dumbbells go up to like what, 50 pounds or even less than that, and probably just one bench.
Yeah.
Yeah, you remember those gyms. Like how would you get
Yeah.
around those?
So with those, like for example, with peak week, we're not really training as close to failure. A lot of times training is looking pretty similar to usual, but like a lot of times what I'll do is take out any movements that are like very loaded in that deep stretch position that accumulate a lot of fatigue or and try to prioritize a bit more shortened by stuff just to be more like glycolytic and burn through some more glycogen. So a lot of times the gym, like worst case scenario, if you don't have access to the gym's like super far away, and you have some bands with you, you can run through a little pump circuit, which usually like the last couple of days before the show, that's all you're really doing is a bit more of like a pump circuit. So you don't have to be going super heavy. So that's usually not too much of an issue. But yeah, with those kind of gyms, just adjusting the movements to the same movement pattern to make sure you're getting a nice pump in all the muscle groups that you're supposed to be training for that specific day. So yeah, I would say it's not like the end of the world. I wouldn't recommend doing any dramatically different movements that are is very fatiguing or muscle quote unquote damaging, as we don't really want to be going into show day being super sore and inflamed. So yeah.
Okay, so probably I think that's a really good point you make for during peak week. And I do agree on that situation. We're not wanting to risk ourselves for injury during peak week as we're all dried up or we're even slowly feeding into we want to avoid all injuries as possible during peak week. I don't know, I'll give you a difficult one. Now, let's say we're about 4 to 6 weeks away from before peak week, and there is a mandatory travel that you have to make. And so you're still prepping, but you're on the road. So how would
Yeah.
you maneuver around that when you've got a very limited access to a gym of equipment, and we're still sort of lifting heavy. So about 6 weeks away from your show day. How would you maneuver around that?
So I would just change the rep range up. So training with higher reps, going to failure on pretty much every single movement, depending on your time frame that you have there. Like if it's a bit more chaotic, you have to shorten your training sessions. That's for supersetting, antagonist paired sets, mile reps and stuff like that can come into play just to get that stimulus that you need to help retain that muscle mass while you're there. So little things like that can definitely help. With dumbbells, I know there's little tricks that you can do. If there's 50-pound dumbbells, you can like stack like two on top of it and like turn that into like if you put 20 and 20 or something. Like there's so many different ways that you can little hacks you can do, or like say they don't have a leg extension, Nordic leg extensions on the ground. So there's a lot of things that you can manipulate. But yeah, if there's like no equipment there, you can even just literally do body weight stuff. Like if you're doing push-ups to absolute failure, I know like Jeff Alberts, like he went on a vacation recently. I know one of his preps he did, he was literally just using like the table at his hotel doing rows and stuff like that, push-ups. He was using his bag like with all of his like clothing and stuff in it and doing curls with it. So there's always a way to make it work. It might not be as motivating training like that, but you can still get a good stimulus. Like you look at COVID workouts, right? Like
Yeah.
I remember training from home and just being super creative with able while still getting a really good stimulus. And I remember some of those pumps were actually quite quite gnarly pumps too, training from home. But so yeah, there's always a way to make it work for sure.
Yeah, I do agree with that. But yeah, I remember COVID workouts, man. Those are yeah, and I understand it's like less motivating, but at least like honestly, if we're traveling, like how long would a trip actually be? Say a week, maybe like
Yeah,
10 days, 10 days or like 10 days, that's actually a pretty long time to be away from home. But all in all, if we're traveling and let's say if it's a week, I don't think if you have a limited access to this 1 week of even skipping some heavy lifts, and really don't think on a hypertrophy standpoint, I don't think it's such a, the end of the world. You're not going to lose all those gains, or what we like to call it, just better consider it like a deload week, something like that.
yeah,
Yeah. And that's going to be a problem if you had a deload week and then you're going on a trip. That's going to be a problem. Well, not
yeah,
a
one
big
hundred
problem.
percent.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because, yeah, if you plan it out and have it so that's a deload week, you're just still getting in some steps and stuff like that. It can be a great, nice little kind of break with your competition prep. So you feel really refreshed going back into that next week. So, no, I think that can be definitely well planned. I wouldn't recommend if you're really close to the show, and especially if you're running a little behind, then skipping the workouts and like having a deload weekend, especially if you're bringing calories to maintenance, that might not be the best option. But it just depends on your situation.
True that. But I do find when we go on trips, we probably have, even though if we do have an access to a vehicle or not, I do find when every time we go to a trip, we walk a hell of a lot more than what we're when we're at home. So I do think that activity level actually elevates over time. Let's say we get like 10 to 15K, well, not 10K steps where we're in our comfortable zone where we're at home. And then when we go out on a trip, we're likely to walk up to 15 to 18K steps. I think that's no normal. You go out, you explore, you walk the streets of downtowns, or there are towns there, and you just see stuff and you just walk more. So at least that aspect, you're getting your steps in and you're way above what your target steps are going to be. So I think that is something that it's pretty, at least that's good for you. Um,
Yeah.
I think also what I also want to touch base is, while we're on this topic, is when we're away from home. Let's go back to not peak week, because peak week is, I know everybody is going to be a little bit more delicate. However, we're talking about 4 to 6 weeks away before your show, and you may have to make a travel. Some of the foods that you might be eating when you're away. you don't have a kitchen or you don't have all your go-to foods while you're here, even though you're in a grocery store. And if you're on a trip, would you really want to be meal prepping every single time and just stay away from, yeah, be away from your family or who your friends are going to be? Yeah, I don't think that's, yeah. So how would you, what would your like your thoughts be if you gotta eat out and you're on the road?
Yeah. So yeah, just I would say there's probably like some snacks and like maybe like a breakfast meal from time to time where you're just having, say, your own food that you brought to like the hotel room where you're eating, or even like the options at like the hotel if there's like the bed and not what is that thing where like the breakfast where they have like the cereal, the
The
waffles, the
buffet,
egg.
yeah, the
Yeah,
breakfast buffet.
yeah, the breakfast buffet. There might be things where you can pick out there and make some solid choices with the cereal, like having a decent portion size there, with like making sure that you have Fairlifes or protein shakes or something on hand to keep that protein up a bit more. But when it comes to eating out, just choosing for smart options when you're eating out, like instead of going with the pizza, like see what they have. Like, do they have like a sirloin steak that you can have it so they're not buttering it, have like a potato with it, have like steamed vegetables or something, so you can still have like a nice, like that's if you're in prep, that food's going to taste amazing. So you can still have that there for lunch, like things like Subway, things like burrito places, all these kind of things generally have some pretty good options for you. Like you can double up on the protein there and still fit it in that way. But I would just say like err on the side of like is it underestimating things or over? I think overestimating. So you
Overestimate,
want to,
yeah.
yeah, you want to like overestimate. So like if you believe that this thing is 500, add maybe 100 extra calories to like 600. Like think that that has 600 calories in it, and just log it that way. So because like even if you can find all these food items on MyFitnessPal or on their website, the accuracy is probably not going to be very concise. Like it's probably going to have a decent amount of error. Like the person's not like leveling off or like weighing out the food that they're cooking for you. So there's going to be a degree to error. So I always just err on the side of having a bit more or logging more than what I actually had. And that way you can still make even progress during your trip if you're tracking the appropriate way.
I agree. I agree. So things like very simple foods, like tra at least trackable foods you see on the menu, like say a sirloin. If it's 8 ounce, at least that's if you're on that fitness pal, it's a little bit more trackable. If we're eating something like I don't know, like I know not tilapia, like tacos. I mean that's going to be hard. Like a whole bunch of nachos, that's going to be like hard to track by gram. You don't even know
Yeah.
how much like 300 grams of nachos look like. Yeah, we just never know. So I think, yeah, try to stick with other simple foods if possible. But I think you make a really good point is we want to overestimate on some of the foods that we're eating over when we're out.
Yeah.
I mean that way that and then you don't actually overeat and spill and we don't really lose all your gains to just that one meal, honestly. But it's still something that we want to be dialed in on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Another hack that I've been using now with like AI is like with ChatGPT. Like if I say have a meal that it's like I can't find anything close to it on my Fitness Pal or like on their website or anything, I'll literally search up that meal into ChatGPT. Like I've had this specific meal. It has this specific ingredients in it. What would the macros and calories look like? And then it'll bring up something. Usually it's fairly reasonable. I've had a couple times where I'm like, that's definitely under. But it can be a great way if you're guesstimating, like if you have no choice, like it's a homemade meal that gets brought in front of you and like you fucked up, you didn't prep or you like it's just a way of like seeing roughly where it's at. So I would say doing that is going to be better than just being like, fuck it, I'm just going to eat it. And like just still having some awareness, bring some awareness to that meal.
Yeah.
But yeah,
But yeah, I like how you're using AI or ChatGPT to actually take a photo of the food and asking AI to guesstimate for you. I think that's a really smart move. And then now we can have a little bit more accuracy other than just eyeballing stuff.
like
But
if
let's say like does it work? Like how does it work if you're if you're taking a picture of it's a family gathering and it's a big plate of foods.
So
Um,
the one that I think I actually don't take a picture. I literally just input in like the specific food name. So like if I'm at a restaurant and there's a specific meal name for it, and like I'll type it in and see like ask for the ingredients of it, and if that seems to match up, then I'll just be like, okay, like what are the macros of a typical this meal at a restaurant, and then it'll kind of bring that up. So I know there are some like AI tracking apps out there that I think still have a large degree of error that I wouldn't recommend utilizing yet. I'm sure give it like 2 years. We'll probably like an invention I always wanted to have is like, and watch somebody's gonna create this now. Where there's a device in your mouth that tracks how many calories you're consuming. So and then it's just you just look on your watch and you're like, okay, I'm at this. I'm just gonna eat a little bit more, and like you know exactly how many calories you're consuming. So and like there's like a little thing that maybe takes a picture, like records how much food's going into your mouth and somehow dissects it. And I don't know. I feel like that would be very cool, but I don't know if anybody would. I think it could help, but yeah, I'm getting off track here.
you got to trademark that right now. So if somebody takes
Yeah.
your idea, man,
Yeah.
we're missing out.
Yeah.
But speaking of that, I do think that it might be coming. Maybe not the tooth thing, but at least something right now is all underdeveloped. Ray-Ban actually has already developed their second version of those camera with the glasses on that can do recordings and that has a sort of a built-in speaker headphone right next to your ear. So it could play songs, it could take a picture. It's got this camera right in the side, or I don't know if it's center on the side, I don't remember. It can record videos and it will directly link up to your phone. So you're getting basically a FPS version of what you're seeing through those pair of glasses. Now they're not very appealing to look at first run, but I think technology over, as you said, over the course of 2 years, 3 years, they develop their skills, they develop the aesthetics of the pair of glasses and the technology of it. Probably by the time you look down on on that meal, it could pick up just like the scan your meal thing function on MyFitnessPal. It could probably potentially do the same thing and do a guesstimate and link it straight to whatever app is on your phone. Well, let's hope for the best. But I mean, like I think eating it and putting something in your tooth, I don't know. That's may sound like it's a bit of a stretch at this era. Maybe
Yeah.
that's when we're dead. I
I
don't
don't know
know.
about putting it in your tooth, but yeah, like putting it like having something, yeah, like glasses, I think would probably be a better, more like
Something that
most
would
people would
like
do that
exists now,
rather
right?
than inserting something into
Inside
yeah.
inside the tooth. Yeah, it's something that exists now.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I do believe that if it's in the tooth and it's a sensor, it's a little bit difficult to sense. Like I don't know, maybe it's beyond our technology right now. I think the taste buds are something that picks up whatever ingredients in there instead of the tooth. I don't know. Then just
I
random
was more
thought
so just thinking like a camera that kind of like yeah, but
in your mouth.
we're getting yeah. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's definitely something you should definitely put a trademark in. And somebody does develop that, man, like, that's my freaking idea. Yeah, for sure. So we're way off now, but coming back in, would you bring any sort of supplements with you, like your creatine or stuff like that?
Yeah, like typically I'll just continue like bringing any of the supplements that I've been utilizing throughout the whole prep. So if it's like a multivitamin, if it's like vitamin D, creatine, what other like supplements that you've been typically bringing? I know some people will bring like a potassium supplement if like the foods that they're having doesn't have enough potassium, so they can match up the ratios a bit more.
Mhm.
But I find generally getting it just from like food sources, generally, I think it absorbs a little bit better that way too. But yeah, no, for supplements, just pretty much the basics: protein powder. Definitely bring one that you know digests well with you. You don't want to be trying a new protein powder and have you bloating and getting cramps and drawing more water into like your stomach region due to that. So yeah, making sure that the foods that you are bringing, like you've had them or you've experimented with them before.
But all in all, I think that's a really good point. As just like foods, we want to bring all the supplements that your body is used to, and I think you make a really good point. Let's not start anything that your body's not used to. So that's just to avoid any different variations that might happen. So that's a really good thing that you point out there. How about just now we're going to be doing this. Well, you're going to be doing this in about 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Um, so things on just to plan ahead for day of the show.
So day of the show, like planning there, just making sure that you have all your meals available. You have extra too. The worst thing that happens is you run out of food and you're still a little flat and you're like trying to figure out, oh, I got to get more food now. And so yeah, making sure you have extra food. Having a small bag. I always like having a small bag just to put my food in, my bands, my number, my shorts, if you're not already wearing it. Having a little checklist, like I always send out to my clients a little checklist of things like to make sure they have, so that they're good, that they're not stressing. Because that's the biggest thing with peak week, right? Most people are just they're in a very hyper sensitive, like high stress place. So anything we can do to lower that is going to be a good thing because if your stress is constantly going up higher and higher and higher, cortisol is going to go higher. Bodies can sometimes act a little funky, and you might hold on to a little bit more water retention if those kind of things are happening. So anything like planning ahead, with all my athletes, if for the actual peak week itself, like we have the plan already set up at the week prior. Like we go over everything that the foods they're going to be having, what that looks like, what to expect each day. So that once that week hits, they're not like scrambling to try to get things. They already have it planned out and everything's ready to go.
That's great. Yeah. That's something that I did. Yeah, I actually wanted to talk about, but you just said it straight out. Um, actually literally plan ahead. And I just wanted to add on to that is besides your number, your posing, your food, and then you're also planning on your tan times, your check-in times, so they just don't run each other with your meal times. And I do want to ask you on this. Since it is show day, we are either limiting water or maintaining water at a certain level on of show day, depending on the individual. Now, we have some of our go-tos are some dry foods like rice cakes, Rice Krispies, things. These carbs are going to be easier to eat and bring along with you on show day. What are some of the proteins that you would pick on show day?
Yeah. So I've done two different things. Like with like Team 3 and J, like they had my protein intake literally be the exact same amount as like other days. I generally, for most of my athletes, like to lower it a little bit because protein's not as important on that day, and it can sometimes add a little bit more just food bulk to your stomach, and it might slow down digestion a little bit. So like generally, protein sources are like a little bit more minimized, and then choosing like easy diet, like whey is a good one, or just a small bit of chicken or a small little bit of beef or something like that. I don't mind having in there. I if it's going to be like a large amount of chicken, then yeah, I would try to keep it more towards, especially if you're closer to the stage time, have it be like a whey. If you're waking up first thing in the morning, having a little bit of chicken, that's fine. But yeah, keeping it closer you get to the show, the more calorie dense the food items are, just so you're not having as much food bulk sitting in your stomach. And like
Agree.
another thing is too, if you say wake up flat and you're like, oh man, I need a lot of carbs, like having like Gatorade or dextrose powder or something like that can be a great way to get a lot of fast acting carbs in. But if you're waking up and you're like in a good spot, just having some smaller but a bit more frequent than usual, like mixed meals where there's I generally find a little bit more fat in them just to hold on and like slow things down and make sure that you're maintaining. Because sometimes if you just have carbs and fats are too low, like you can burn through those carbs quite quickly. I've had that happen with a couple people before where it's like, oh man, they flatten out like so quick. So we got to keep the fats a little bit higher. But yeah, so there's quite a few variables that you just got to watch out for.
Yeah, I agree. So fats, I think that's going to be quite a straightforward source. Nuts, like almond butter. I don't know if almond butter is that like high in fats or something?
Yeah, almond butter. I find peanut butter, almond butter, even dark chocolate. I find it's got some sugars and stuff in it too, and it's really dense.
Hmm.
Most people agrees, and it also adds a little bit of potassium to that meal if you're because a lot of times you're not having as much like voluminous veggies. Like that's another thing that I've been kind of experimenting with a little bit more on, is trying to keep the potassium and sodium ratios relatively close. Obviously, we'll load on sodium right before on stage and stuff like that, and maybe a little bit higher sodium meals like the second last one. But yeah, I find just to keep potassium up because like what I've noticed with some people is they'll take out like all their vegetables, but they don't make up for it with some potassium sources. So their potassium goes really low and their sodium's really high, and then sometimes some weird things can happen there too.
Yeah. So I'm gonna ask the a very common question. It's probably semi myth. People will will probably remove a lot of their vegetables just to avoid fiber and bloating of the stomach. And what they'll replace that with all that potassium is a banana.
Yeah. So like what about that?
So
Like
if people will
do
just
that?
like take out all the vegetables and have banana and then carbs and fats on show day or even prior to show day, just to prevent them from spazzing and all that stuff. I want you
Yeah.
take. I want to hear your take on this.
Yeah, so it doesn't really like any food sources is if you're getting potassium, right? Like it doesn't matter what source you're getting from. Like if you're getting it from a source that's bloating you more, then yeah, we want to remove that. But if you're having it with a source that like you're fine, digestion's fine, you're not getting any weird bowel stuff from it, that's totally fine. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's great. That's a really good insight. So banana does work for for some individuals, but if I as I just wanted to add on there, if you haven't had these bananas throughout your prep, I will not recommend it just to try it on show day, just to remove any variables that might happen to your physique. It is show day. You might be only 30 minutes or even an hour away from yourself from stepping on stage, and we want to avoid all this. And if something does happen to your body, put yourself into even higher stress, and shit's gonna hit the fan. So let's try to avoid any of those different variables as well.
Yeah. I think
Um,
I was gonna say like because what I've been actually doing this past like every second week, I've been experimenting with a slightly different kind of quote unquote peaking protocol.
yeah.
So like experimenting with the different types of foods, seeing how my body responds to them, how digestion is with them, and like going and seeing how my physique's looking in the morning. So like for example, like what was it like 3 weeks, 4 weeks ago? I've been trying to do something similar to like the rapid backload that Cliff Wilson does with his clients, but I'm kind of not quite as depleted. So, but I've been having some higher carb days, upwards of like 750 to like 850 to 900 grams of carbs, while keeping protein down and fat slightly down. Yeah, just seeing how my body responds to those kind of variables, and with water and like do like because you want to experiment ahead of time, especially if you're doing a protocol you've never done before, to see how your body's going to react. Because if you do something quite crazy, like say like something like the rapid backload, and you've never done that before, you're probably not going to be looking too good on that day unless it's like a freak accident, you did everything perfectly. So yeah, if you're doing something more dramatic, definitely practice it ahead of time. If you're doing something more conservative, you can pretty much just mimic something like you would do with your refeeds. Like have you don't have to actually deplete, and you can just have your regular low days and then have your two high days right before your show. And usually that's going to bring a pretty solid look. So yeah, like if you're there's a lot of information on peaking processes out there, and like if you don't practice it ahead of time, a lot of times it can add a lot of stress, and like you might forget some, and it's not usually worth it. So yeah, if you're trying to do something that's going to be a little bit different than or a lot more variables at hand, make sure you practice it ahead of time.
I agree. And that goes for first timers as well. If you're doing your first time and just go with it's just keeping it nice and simple. That keeping it simple and a routine that you're used to also will help keeping the stress levels down. And then overall, you just peak a little bit easier and a little bit better, and even your physique will actually show that. Um, and then in the future, when you're prepping a second time, then I think you can experiment with different peaking protocols, like loadings and things like that. But then that for now, I think for even for first timers, keeping it nice and simple, like as you said, there are a couple low days and then slowly feed into your two high days, you'll be fine. Any funny stories or past travel prep shows stuff that you wanted to share?
I'm trying to think. Let's see. No, like I think yeah, like it's like peaking is always one of those things. Like I feel like as a coach, the more you know, the almost more stressful it can be sometimes. And sometimes the less you know, the you just follow something, the less stress there is. Because I've noticed that with myself with certain peaking, like if you're a very high anxiety person, and you overanalyze going through prep, sometimes like you can get in your own way a lot where you're like, oh, I think I'm too fat. Oh no, I think I'm too full. And then you're constantly changing your decisions and adding more overwhelm and stress. So if you're somebody that's going through a prep and you know you're quite high strung person, like having somebody there to help guide you to be like that second eye to make sure you're doing what you need to be doing without making last minute crazy changes is going to be something that's I couldn't say enough of. Yeah.
Yeah, great word of advice. So keep those in mind. If you guys are looking for your first prep in 2025, is that going to be feasible? 2025? It's like mid 2025 now. We
Okay.
still have a couple of more shows down the road for WNBF and IMBF down in the US. So if you are looking for your first prep and you're looking to speak to a more of a coach, you've got Brandon. He's a very knowledgeable guy, and of course myself. Ha ha ha. Here's the timestamps for the only part that you have to listen to, and then you can just ignore the rest of the whole podcast. No, just kidding. Just kidding. But then, yes, if you are looking for your prep, please reach out to us. We're more than happy to answer any concerns that you may have. And if you're thinking about it, please speak to one of us. You're more than welcome to speak to one of us for to plan your next season. So me and actually incorrect grammar, Brandon and I will highly recommend a longer period, at least 24 weeks and above. And if you're a first time, we've talked about this before. You know, if it's your first time, we do recommend even longer than that, maybe up to 8 months or 9 months ahead, so we can really understand where you are currently and plan out your season and see how far away are you from your physique is from what we will consider, stage weight. Any final things that you want to add before we close out?
No, and and that's the another big reason to have a bit of a longer prep time, especially with the coaches, just to really get that communication back and forth, understand how people communicate, how they act, and like everybody's going to be a little bit different their first time through prep, and the more time we have with you, the more predictable we're going to know how your body responds and how you generally behave under high stress, low stress, and kind of figure out what makes you tick to help push you to those new extremes.
Yes, I totally agree. Great point, great point. But yeah, thanks for tuning in. Really appreciate your time and stay tuned. You will have your first competition on May 3rd, so that's in 2 weeks' time. Is there going to be a stream for BC Cup?
Yeah, there should be a stream online. I'll post it on my Instagram story.
Yeah.
I guess we can post it on like the Thing Nerds podcast story Instagram too if you guys aren't following that already as well.
Mhm.
And yeah, and then I guess you'll have a live stream for your show as well, right?
Yes,
For
so there's we will be sharing on the WMBF channel and this channel on this Instagram as well as my personal Instagram. I will be sharing the live stream for Brandon's. It's going to be on the same show, the WMBF and Vancouver, and your BC Cup show is going to be on the same day. I will share both links up on these Instagrams, so you can go watch Brandon compete for WNBF. I'm not competing, but I'll be there. You'll probably see me walking around. And it's we have a lot of competitors in this year's WNBF Vancouver show. There's over 100 competitors this year.
Sweet, man.
It's a
That's all.
record-breaking. Yeah, we've never had over 100 this year, and the introduction to classic physique really brought a lot of male competitors this year. We
Sweet.
have a whole ton of men physique competitors. So that's let's hope some of them may transition to Kelowna and we may see them there. But all in all, we will be sharing all those links and live streams on our story, so pay attention to that. That yeah, but that's all that, and we'll probably see you guys next time. Thanks.